What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Medicopolis podcast, where two teenagers discuss medical dilemmas and police them to reach an ultimatum on whether the situation is ethical or not. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen, and we hope you enjoy our episode on the ethics of mental health issues in the workplace. So, depression and anxiety are both problems that unfortunately have increased in medical student residency or students in residency as well as doctors all over the world. And I guess it could be boiled down to, according to research, to two main hypotheses. The first one is that it could be due to the person's personality traits, so like their past mental health problems or other problems that have recurred even before they've gotten started. Like, let's say with a medical student, like if they're in medical school, they may have had past problems during their pre-med experience or even high school experience that have affected the way that they, I guess, react to increased pressure. So what do you think about this first hypothesis? Like, how do you think high school students who are interested in going into medicine or pre-med students can sort of start combating their mental health problems? That way they're prepared when they get to medical school or beyond.
Wow. That's a pretty big question to start off because, a lot of these issues they stem from a variety of problems. It's hard to just pinpoint the one, you know what I mean? Like the one issue that someone or many people are dealing with. So I feel like just and personally, a lot of these issues, if they come from high pressure, like high workload, I think a lot of it should be just before going into a state where they're on the field or working like directly on the field. It should be a time where they're getting more adjusted to those types of workplaces, I guess. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, because like someone who's immediately going from just learning to immediate residency or to immediate like on-site work, it's going to be hard to make that adjustment. And obviously, again, that's only one issue that some of these students are having with being in the with like these mental health issues and whatnot. But by I guess sort of preparing for it earlier on, I guess it's kind of the obvious way out of answering the question, right? Because there's many things that can lead to these issues. So I think
Yeah. Wait, now that
a
I think of
more
it, my sorry for interrupting. My question was
yeah.
really like general actually, cuz like
Yeah,
everyone
yeah.
has different I guess problems, but I guess what I think about like in terms of like pre-med students and like kids in high school even is like especially I'm interested in going into medicine and like finding a mentor, for example, that's both going through like medical school, for example, but also someone that's outside of medical school that who's already practicing. Like to have those people guiding you can certainly help reduce rates of like depression and anxiety. So it's all about,
Yeah.
I guess, if you're able to, if your environment allows you to, forming connections with people, so that way you have people to, rely on as you go through your experience as a high school student, pre med, etc. As you make your way up
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
ranks.
But again, these issues are not always focused on like preparedness or readiness, right? Like these can happen for any sort of reason. It could be like a lot of pressure on a student because they're dealing with patients' lives. Like it's hard to prepare for that just by learning with a mentor, right? Because there's only so much that another person can do.
Right.
A lot of these problems they also stem from the self, and without the self actually, or without that student being in those scenarios, without the mentor or with all the pressure, it's like hard to tell what when they're going to falter. And it's not again, it's not like a bad thing, right? We can all agree like a problem that someone has in the workplace should be dealt with like sort of with care, right? It's not something you just skip over. A problem is something that should be dealt with. But if we're dealing with these kinds of pressures that like life or death, then it's almost really hard to be able to say, okay, just take a step back. 'Cause it just it makes it more it's like a puddled mess. It's very hard to for someone to pinpoint the exact problem. So if it's just one person dealing with all this, imagine what like a whole group of students or a whole group of doctors could be dealing with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's way too hard for someone to be like, okay, this is what I'm pinpointing, this is the issue, this is what I'm dealing with. So like I don't know, for a group just to make it like a larger scale, it seems like almost like not feasible to me.
And the reason why these problems of depression and anxiety are so big for all of these students interested in medicine or practicing professionals is because it does have a real tangible impact on the patients that they will eventually treat. The second hypothesis of the research for the reasons why physicians and medical students are having higher burnout rates is because the contextual stress of where they are, or essentially why, or like the place where they are has an impact on them. The medical school that they are at has an environment where the person is not able to thrive.
And again, yeah, these issues are really important just because we've seen medical licensing boards getting away with revoking licensures or preventing a physician from working due to mental disorders, even though this is technically illegal under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which covers issues like we've talked about, like depression and anxiety. But we still see them getting away with these, getting away with these cases, right? Where a doctor who's put their life essentially into their work still gets things taken away just because they want to address these issues that are affecting their own mental health. And I feel like it's almost sickening, right? Because someone who's dedicated, upwards of 12, 13 years of their life in college and then studies, residency, and whatnot, just have everything immediately taken away because of something that they're managing on their own. Even if, right, even if they can still work to, like, even if they still can solve problems at the same rate or they're still doing just as much work as another physician without mental health issues, we could still see cases of medical licensing boards getting away with revoking licensure and stuff. I feel like it's almost kind of sickening to see these things happen, right?
Yeah, and I feel like the most scariest, or like the scariest statistic having to do with this is that like about 1 in 15 surgeons like said that they had suicidal thoughts, but 60% of them are unwilling to go seek help because they're afraid of getting their license revoked. So because there's this idea of, oh my god, my license is going to get revoked, that's the reason why they're not willing to get help is very very alarming, because suicide is a huge problem. In fact, I think it's the biggest problem in medical students in terms of causes of death. So that's kind of that's a blaring alarm. That should be a blaring alarm as a reason why, maybe they should have like training, or they should be offered help with their mental issue or disorder instead of getting their license revoked under this disabilities.
Yeah, and also, I guess now that we're talking about the statistics, a survey that was conducted in March 2020, where nearly half the students were male and female, the prevalence of depression and anxiety were nearly half of the people who took the survey. So I feel like it's a really big issue, especially because these mental issues aren't just being addressed by maybe 10 or 15% of all the physicians or med students that we're talking about, right? These issues are really big, like incredibly big issues that like affect a lot of people. Like nearly half of the people in this of the med students and doctors in this survey reported depression or anxiety, right? I think that's just crazy because you don't see that kind of pressure of life or death in any, or maybe not any, but in most fields, right? In most other fields, you don't see these type of life or death pressures. But the fact that these depression and anxiety levels are nearly half of the entire sample populace is just like completely that's almost it's almost terrifying to me, right? Like you
Yeah.
get what I'm saying?
Mhm. Where'd you
Yeah,
get the
because
Where's the survey from? Just out of curiosity.
it is actually from the American Medical Association.
Yeah, so
It
that's a
was
pretty trusted store. So it's not like they're like not sampling like they're using random sampling, I would hope, in order to get their sources. So it's definitely a serious and legitimate problem.
and even if this was from maybe just like one college or something, if you get what I mean, it's not like the statistic wouldn't be repeated throughout multiple colleges. It's not because of a college or because of a specific medical like facility, right? It's not just because of a specific hospital. It's not like the location of a hospital is causing these people to have these mental issues.
Though could
It's
play a
because
role though. Though could play a role.
it could, yeah, it could play a role, but definitely not. of the same prevalence as the pressure that a med school or a med student or a doctor would have, right? Because again, these are pressures of life or death. If when you really get down to it, that's what this is, life or death. So it's if we can't address these issues starting with the med students or like earlier and earlier and earlier, like if we can't find the root cause, these problems will only continue to develop and it'll only create worsening and worsening statistics that not only affect these med students and these doctors, but also the communities as a whole. And I feel like that's really the important part here, right? I mean, a med student has anxiety or depression and they're I guess barred or not able to work. Like sure, that affects them, but it also affects the countless numbers of patients that they might see in the future,
I
right?
mean, yeah,
All because of the anxiety that they're facing.
strictly from like a number standpoint, like considering the mental health of the person and the mental health, or sorry, not person, the doctor and the mental health of like the patients that they're treating, it's certainly important to what is it called, prioritize the patients because they're a greater number of people. The doctor is having a big impact on a larger group of people. So definitely in terms of like a number standpoint, the priority should be focusing on the like fixing the mental health of the doctor so that way they like don't have this negative impact on their patients. But at the same time, with these like with this legislation such as the Disabilities Act that you mentioned earlier, Ashwin, I think that it's pressuring doctors clearly, as we've talked about. It's pressuring them into thinking that they can't go out and actually seek help from people and like seek help from professionals, and in that again it's causing them to have a negative impact on the entire world that they're of people that they're treating.
And especially because I don't know, are you planning on going in the medical field?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I am too, right? These issues are things that we might even face in the future. So it's again finding the root cause and dealing with it early on not only impacts the countless number of patients that people are going to see, or the doctors or med students are going to see over time, but also the future generations. So it's important for everyone really that these issues get addressed.
And yeah, if we're mentors one day to the future generation of kids that are wanting to be like medical students or be doctors, then that's how we're going to cause that generational impact that you're talking about. And we're going to teach, like, obviously I'm not saying that we would do this, Ashwin, but people who are currently in the system of, oh, I have to suppress my anxiety and depression in order to, what is it called, in order to keep my license, then they're going to teach that to their next generation of physicians that, oh, you have to suppress your anxiety and depression so that way you get to keep your license. And so that kind of creates this system of thinking that really does cause harm and does cause suicide rates to either continue or maybe potentially rise in the future, which is clearly a serious problem.
And that was our 16th episode. So thank you guys so much for listening to the Medicopolis podcast. We hope you all stay tuned for next week's episode, and as well as what is to come in the future.